failing at something, a project, a job, running your business, does it make you a failure? Failing is temporary, even if it's big or small. Let's talk about it on the Saturday Morning Hustle podcast today. It's Saturday. I'm in the office. You know what that means. The Saturday Morning Hustle. This is not what I was intended to talk to you about this week, but I've seen a few things happen recently that made me want to make this commitment to this conversation. Now, we've talked about failing in the past, talked about the fact that there are so many valuable lessons when things don't go as expected, when they go poorly, when you have negative outcomes. There are lessons. We have talked a lot on this podcast about the fact that it happens to everyone. No one is perfect, and no one has ever gone through life without failing, both small and big. And in fact, if you're probably over a certain age, if you're older than a teenager, you've probably lost a job, been fired from a job, been laid off. You definitely have had projects, whether they were in school or professionally, or even something that you do on the side or recreationally that did not work out well for you. Maybe you started something and you ended up not doing that again because it failed. Maybe you had a job or a career field or a pursuit that you decided to not pursue anymore, maybe a career change or a position change because your aptitudes, your skills, your talents didn't match up to that. All of these things are ways we as human beings fail. But as we've defined many times on this podcast, something is only a failure if it's the final time you do something, if you completely quit or don't go back to that. So a career change, a career field change, moving jobs, these things you might consider failures because they are final. They were big enough and distinct enough, and the lesson learned, the lessons that come with it, was that you should be doing something else or doing it in a different place or with a different combination of people, or capitalizing on your intelligence, your skill set, your experience in a different way. That could be defined as failure. That does not define you as a failure, as a human being, as a professional, as the person taking on this activity. Failing at an activity, failing at a pursuit, failing at a job, failing in running your business is temporary. Failing is temporary. Failing is a specific time and situation. You failed at that. That thing that you failed at that specific time. You could always come back and do it again in the future when you have different experience, different knowledge, different teams, different scenarios, or not come back to it because you've learned the lessons. And again, as long as you learn the lessons, you can move forward. But none of this equates to a permanent failure of you as a human being. Why? Because it happens to everyone, because there are lessons to be learned. There are things that can be improved. If you were a computer that could only do things in a certain way, and that certain way fails, well, then that computer would be a failure because it's destined to fail because it has no ability to break out of that system of failure. You are a human being. I'm a human being. We are human beings. We can change. We can adapt. We can adjust. We can learn lessons and move forward from them in different ways, even if what we do as we move forward is something different, which would thus define the other thing we do, the previous thing we were doing, as something we failed at. But that failure actually make you a better professional moving forward in the next thing you do. Obviously, the lessons learned. There were mistakes made if you were failing. And here's a sidebar to even this first point I'm making. You can do everything right. You can try to do things in the right way. You can be as professional, as ethical, as prepared as you possibly can and still fail at something. There are so many moving parts and factors in business. and trying to achieve success and to be successful in whatever it is you're trying to do, that failing, having a failure, even something that moves you off into a different direction, is not simply because you weren't good enough, capable enough, smart enough, or didn't do things in the right way. You can do things absolutely right, much as you can. Again, we're human, and still fail at it. So, sidebar over. Lessons learned, the ability to change, the experience you've gone through, and that sting, that bite, that bad taste in your mouth, the after effects of a failure should change your attitude, should change your outlook, should definitely teach you lessons through the process, and motivate you, inspire you, move you in a way so that you don't reach that level of failure again. Now, you will have fails, you'll have shortcomings, you'll have unexpected outcomes, you'll have negative outputs. Those things happen again to all of us. It happens on a regular basis. As long as you're learning and to move forward from it, that's fine. That's part of the process. You might even have another, what you would define as failure happen. You might change again. They say most people change careers 3 to 5 times in their lifetime. I've had major career changes in my life. Started in the music industry, got into graphic design and the creative side of marketing, worked as a creative director until I got into the business development strategy side of that same industry, just a different focus. Now more entrepreneurial and definitely on the business side that has very little outside of creative problem solving, very little reflection on what I was doing as a creative director and on the creative side of marketing, which was an extension of what I did in the music industry. So these things go together, but they are different. I've made changes along the way. You have probably made changes. You've changed careers. You've changed jobs. Maybe you studied something in college and you changed to something different. Maybe you had a job that you really liked and appreciated until something changed or a lesson learned or the situation made you not want to do that anymore. Or you learned something new, you're inspired by something new, and you were taken in a different direction, thus leaving the past one. These things happen to all of us. We all make changes. We all have successes and we all have failures. The only thing you can take from failing, just temporary, and a failure, which is permanent to that, but you move forward and you change and you're motivated and inspired in different ways. The only thing you can take with you is the lesson, the experience, and the ability to change yourself through self-reflection, understanding what you did right, what you did wrong, owning up to the mistakes and the things you did wrong, accepting the positives that you did create, the things you did well, the things that you do feel a mastery of command over, the things that you can count in your skill set and your experience and your expertise because you did them well. You can do a lot of things well and still overall fail. Taking all of those things, but that self-reflection, the mistakes you made that you would want to avoid in the future, how you can approach things, how you can do things differently, how you are a different person as you move to the next thing that you do that you don't want to have a failure at because you have that bad taste still in your mouth of the previous failure. That understanding, that motivation, and your intent. And this is something that I see a lot that people don't understand, and typically you can't really understand about a person unless you know them very well. There are a lot of people who appear to be doing everything right. There are a lot of people who appear to be doing everything wrong. You never really know what their intent is. Most people don't pronounce it out loud. And most people's intent is to be successful and to create success for people around them, the people that work with them, for them, collaborate with them, etc. Sometimes some people are very self-focused and their intent is only to be doing things good for them, and they don't really care how it affects or benefits or touches other people in their sphere. If your intent was correct, if you were trying to do things the right way for all the right reasons, it helps you as you self-reflect on the things that you wish you had done differently, the lessons that you learned, the things that you would do differently moving in the future, the adjustments to yourself, to your motivation, to your thought process. to your basket of skills, your toolbox of expertise, etc. All of these things you add to with that self-reflection, with understanding what happened, by taking accountability and understanding your intent. If your intent was good, if it was right, if you always intended to be successful, to create success for yourself and others, to play your role the way it was expected by all of the other people involved, whether they were dependent on you or you were dependent on them in the situation, that intent is how we internally use self-reflection to make ourselves better as we move forward in our next endeavor, because failing is temporary. We're moving on to something else, big or small. We want to make something better out of it and better out of ourselves. This is the human nature, and it works when your intent is to be good. Your intent is to be successful. Your intent is to be ethical. Your intent is to do things the right way for the right reasons, because when you create value for yourself and others, there's benefit to all. Rising tide lifts all boats. So now you've had a failing temporarily that has created a failure. You need to do something different. You need to make major changes. You need to possibly even start over and look at the world differently, look at your career path differently, look at yourself differently, your skills, etc. But you can move forward. You can rebuild. You can be better. You absolutely can be successful in the future because you have gone through the experience, because you've learned lessons, because you have been self-reflective, because you understand what happened. You have identified the things that you can take with you positive. You have identified the negative things you would like to avoid and not repeat in the future. You understand your motivation and intent. If you can do all of this, you can rebuild your psyche, yourself, your skill set, create opportunities for you to go on and again, to do another project, to take a different job, to be in business, or maybe even run your own business again. The only failure that is permanent, the only way you can make yourself a failure, to be a failure, is if you're unwilling to make changes, if you are stuck in that same loop, if you commit to repeating the same mistakes that lead to failure over and over again for any reason whatsoever, because you're stubborn, because you think you're right, because you don't think it's fair that you failed, whatever your reasoning is, if you're going to be that computer that is locked into a system of continual failure, then and only then are you failing and a failure as a person. So remember, we've all failed. We've all had failure. We've all done things and decided to not ever do that again. We've all made changes in ourselves, in our lifestyle, in our careers, in our path to success. But we're also all learning our lessons. We're taking the experience, the expertise, the information that we learn from it. We're being self-reflective. We're understanding what went right and what went wrong. We're trying to use what went right to build on. We're trying to use it to motivate ourselves to be better, to avoid that bad taste in our mouth, and focused on our intent to create success for ourselves and others, doing things the right way, in the right way, for all the right reasons, because it's the right thing to do, not because that's how you win, that's become successful, that's become how you become what it is you're trying to be, but because doing the right thing is always the right thing. We've had failures. We've all had them. We've all made the changes necessary to not fail again, to start over, and to do it one more time. Failure requires that you change. So if you can change, if you can learn, if you can embrace what has happened to you, get that bad taste out of your mouth, get back up on the horse and start over again, taking a different job, starting a different business, following a different path to success, rebuild yourself. Avoid the temptation to make the past mistakes, to be the same person, to be committed to the things that led you down the wrong path. The potential for future success is 100% in front of you. So when you fail small, You learn lessons, but they're small lessons. You can move forward, but you can only move forward so much from small failures. Big failures, big failings, even something that makes you change what you're doing, which means what you were doing was a failure, has benefit if you can embrace it and move forward with it. If you stay there, if you get stuck there, and if you wallow in it, if you let past failures be your quicksand, you will be trapped. If you understand it happens to everyone, if you understand career changes and job changes and different types of relationships and different paths to success happen to all of us, if you can learn your lessons, if you can self-reflect, if you can understand the good and bad and embrace all of it as expertise that helps you move forward, if you can motivate yourself because you have this experience, because you survived this experience, because you know you can and you can do it again because you survived this one, if you remember your intent was right, if you remember all of this, you can make the changes necessary to start over, to get back on the horse, to rebuild your career path, to rebuild your business. Failure requires change. If you make that change, you will probably have a failing again in the future, just not the same one. It'll teach you different lessons and you'll be able to move forward from it. Failing at something is temporary doesn't make you a failure. Hope you guys can remember that. As you go out in the world, as you try to achieve things, as you try to be successful, you'll have yeses and nos. You'll have good days and bad days. You'll have wins and you'll have losses. So keep this in mind as you move forward, as you attempt to be successful, because it's a continual process and there are wins and losses. There are successes and failures. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Saturday Morning Hustle. Once again this week, I appreciate you guys so much. Make sure that you stream, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review, tell a friend. I would really appreciate that. Hopefully, I've motivated and inspired at least one of you out there today to take your latest failing, get past it because you're not a failure, and do things bigger, better, differently in the future because you've learned your lessons that come with all of the experiences, good and bad, you've had in the past. I'll see you next week.